you're going to learn 5 public speaking tips to make your message more memorable. The idea is you take whatever existing message you have and you're going to enhance it so it's more likely to stick with your audience. Be sure to download the free PDF of my 7 instant tips to make you a more confident speaker. And now the 5 do's and don'ts to make your message more memorable. Number 1, get your audience to do something physical. Your listeners will remember your message if they are actively involved in it. You have very likely seen speakers ask their audience to raise your hand if you have ever, and then they fill in the rest of the question. That's a little basic, but instead of just asking a question, you're asking your audience to get physically involved by simply raising their hand, and that enhances the message a little bit. But you can do it in a way that ties more directly to your message. My good friend Julian Miravel is an excellent public speaker. In his TEDx talk, one of the points that he made is about staying open while listening. And you can do this with me right now as you watch. He says to his audience, "Do this for me. Take your right hand and make a really tight fist. I want you to feel that pressure, the tension there. Now all I want you to do is open your hand so the palm faces up." This is what it means to listen. Listening is all about accepting. Listening is all about opening your hand. He gives his audience something to do that directly connects to his point. They are participating in the message itself, and that makes it more memorable. David Copperfield, the world-famous magician, opens his show by directly getting his audience involved in a really quick trick. He asks them to extend their hands like this, cross their fingers over this way, and I don't know how he does it, but then he's able to then rotate his hands back into a normal position. And he asks the audience to do this, and of course they can't do it because it's a trick. It's not really possible. But the point is, he gets them involved physically. He asks them to do something, and it's very memorable. Now, it's purely coincidence that we're talking about using our hands in these past examples. There are lots of ways to get your audience involved. Ask them to do something like write something down, take something out of their pocket, stand up. You're only limited by your imagination. The key is that whatever you ask them to do, make sure it reinforces your message. Don't make it random. Now on this topic, let's talk about some don'ts. I don't recommend making your listeners uncomfortable with what you're asking them to do. I don't recommend, for example, asking your audience members to turn to the person sitting next to them and turn to the person on the other side and ask them to say or do something with that person. This will turn off almost all your listeners. And then they're going to be focused on how awkward they feel instead of focusing on your message. So yes, get them involved, but not in a way that makes them want to roll their eyes. The second way to make your message more memorable is to word your main idea in an interesting way. This means using vivid and creative language. Alliteration is one way to do this. That's where you make sure that some of the words in your message start with the same first letter. You see this in some of these superhero names like Wonder Woman, Sorcerer Supreme, Fantastic Four, Guardians of the Galaxy. The best place to use alliteration is in how you word your overall main point of your message, the main theme that drives your whole presentation. In school, we call this your thesis statement. And that's because you'll likely repeat this key message a few times during your presentation. And alliteration will make your message more memorable. And that's why you see alliteration in a lot of corporate or marketing slogans, like for Jaguar. Jaguar's tagline is "Don't dream it, drive it." That's 3 Ds. Or Intel, the computer chip company, their tagline is "Intel Inside." In addition to alliteration, you could use a clever turn of phrase or wording that can have more than one meaning. Journalists do this for their newspaper headlines, and that makes them catchy. And again, you see this in marketing. I was driving near my house the other day, and I passed a John Deere farm equipment location. And right there on the sign, they have a really clever marketing slogan, "Nothing runs like a deer." That's memorable wording. It's a double meaning. Deere is the guy's last name who started the company, and the company's logo has a deer on it. Deers run really fast. Their tractors run really well. It's about as perfect and catchy as you can get. They packed a lot of catchiness into just 5 words by being a little more creative. And if you want an awesome public speaking example, I recommend looking at the reaction video I did to Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. He used every technique in the book to make that more memorable. He used alliteration, metaphor, analogy, parallel structure. I'll put a link to that video in the description below this one. The tip is take your main point, your thesis statement, and look for ways to use vivid language to maximum advantage. Here are some warnings, some don'ts. Don't overdo it. Don't use these techniques everywhere and every part of your message. Too much wordplay can get confusing or distracting. Just use them enough to spice up your message a little bit and make it more memorable. Number 3, tell stories. They are so memorable that I will often remember a good story, but I'll forget who told me the story in the first place. Have you ever had that happen to you? I've been telling stories during this video too, like my friend Julian's story about unclenching his fist. I told the story about driving by John Deere and seeing their sign. Now, to make your stories more memorable, you can do things like act it out a little bit, get animated, put yourself into the action of the story as you tell it to bring it to life. Speak in the voices of the people in the story. My wife was once telling a quick story when she was doing announcements in front of the whole church one day. And for some reason, she was describing a golden retriever. I can't remember why. But just briefly, she started visually wagging around a little bit and panting as if she were the golden retriever. She acted it out a little bit and brought her story to life. Her words told the story, but her actions brought it to life a little bit more. Now, she was being humorous, but you can bring your stories to life in lots of ways that keep your listeners engaged. Just be sure to throw yourself into the story rather than tell the story as if you're a distant observer. Now, here are a couple of qualifications about telling stories. Don't tell long, dragged out stories, especially if you're new to this. Aim for 1 minute for each story. That's your goal. Practice until each story you tell in your next presentation is about 1 minute. Number 4, let your personality shine through. Your personality is one of your biggest public speaking assets. And there are a few ways to let your personality shine through like this. One of them is to first give yourself permission to be yourself. So sure, you have a professional role to play, but nobody wants to see a robot do a presentation. So if you're a little bit fun and goofy, let that shine through in appropriate ways. If you have something interesting or playful that you'd like to add, then do it. As long as it fits in, even a little bit, keep it in the presentation. Another way to let your personality shine through is to prepare your speaking notes in a way that allows you the freedom to adapt and adjust. I was once working with a speaker, we'll call her Tammy, and she was really smart and had a great personality in conversations. But when she presented, Tammy wrote out every single word and directly read her entire presentation. And that meant most of her personality faded to the background. So I coached her to prepare an outline of just key words and to practice conversationally enough so that she only needed to glance at her notes to refresh her memory. And that gave her the freedom to adapt and connect with her listeners and let her personality shine through more and more. Tammy was an instant before and after story, and she became the most memorable presenter in the group simply by limiting her notes and letting her personality shine through. Another way to let your personality shine through is to express your emotions. Now, in professional settings, there's much more room than we often realize to communicate our sincere emotions. If you show your excitement and passion, for example, listeners are more likely to get excited and passionate about your message. If you show concern, listeners will pick up on that. As the old saying goes from Maya Angelou, people will never forget how you made them feel. Emotions are memorable. Now, here's some advice about limits to this. Don't let your emotions become the main point, the main part of the show. Don't get so swept up in your personality that you lack substance or your emotions become a distraction from your core message. And don't fake your emotions. That won't work. Make sure your content is king and let your genuine personality shine through to the extent that it enhances your message. Number 5, add a call to action. This technique is hiding in plain sight at the end of most presentations. A call to action is where you ask your listeners to do something with the message that you've just shared, some simple next step. And this almost guarantees that your message will be more memorable because they're going to live it out a little bit. They're going to take what you've said and experience a small piece of it. You'd normally see a call to action at the end of a persuasive presentation, but it works really well in a normal, informative workplace presentation like training sessions or job orientations or any kind of how-to presentations. Even though it was 15 years ago, I remember almost like it was yesterday when I attended the employee orientation at the college where I still teach. The human resources trainer asked us each to take one simple action, make a decision. That's all it was. He asked me and the other new employees to choose either the state pension program for professors or the 401k program. He didn't try to persuade us. He just shared the information and asked us each to pick one. So I filled out the form and I circled the 401k option. That small call to action, that decision, somehow helped me remember the entire experience very clearly even years later. A call to action requires us to weigh our options, make a decision, take some small action, and that's 100 times more memorable than just letting information go in one ear and out the other. Now, one quick warning about a call to action. Don't ask listeners for too many action steps. Be sure to donate and sign this petition and join this group and pray about it and tell your friends and invite people too. If you ask your listeners for all of that, they're going to say, oh, that's too much, forget it. So keep it simple for your listeners and don't overwhelm them. It's best to just ask them to do one simple thing. Now let's look at these 5 tips again. Which one of these is your favorite? Let me know in the comments section below which of these that you think would help make your message immediately more memorable. And don't forget to download that free PDF of those 7 instant tips to make you a more confident speaker. Till next time, thanks. I will see you soon.